So what do you guys see in this picture here? The black things are actually not the camels. The black things are the shadows. The white things are the camels. The reason I show you this illustration is perception. Functional medicine allows us to reshape our perception and how we view disease. It helps us identify subtle alterations in physiology that contribute to an overt pathology or a result, such as fibromyalgia. So why would we even consider functional medicine? Well, we may need a revised approach in how we treat these complex chronic diseases. Right now, for every dollar spent in North America, 78 cents goes towards chronic disease. Yet the burden of chronic disease continues to rise. What we'd like to see in functional medicine, it helps us identify the mechanisms on how these patients get sick. So we've got overt pathology, which I said is basically a destination. So how do these patients get to that destination? And why are these patients so sick? So here's another article from JAMA 2005. Talks about there's a large gap between what physicians do for patients with chronic disease and what should be done. I think if we start to apply medicines that help patients feel better, along with medicines that help treat the underlying mechanisms or dysfunctions, then we can help restore these patients' health. And that's what it's all about. No one form of medicine has all of the answers when we're dealing with something like this. The New England Journal of Medicine. What does this say about our present state of health? Why are we witnessing the forecast of a decline in life expectancy in the next generation in the face of being the most medicated society the world has ever seen? What functional medicine is able to do is say, why are these patients so sick? What has occurred? This isn't because we don't have an awesome, phenomenal quality emergency care system. It's the changes that have occurred to our diet, lifestyle, and environment. We know that this is a large majority why this epidemic of chronic disease continues to rise. And unless we start asking the questions, why are these patients so sick? We will never beat this rising tide of chronic disease. Functional medicine allows us to identify the why. So the network concept reveals a number of surprising connections amongst diseases, forcing us to rethink the way in which we classify and separate them. So is diabetes mutually exclusive from arthritis? Well, the answer is absolutely not. We know that insulin resistance can contribute to inflammation through adipocytokine release, and we know that inflammation can contribute to insulin resistance. So we see that even though we diagnose these things as separate entities or separate problems, the underlying dysfunctions may be similar. So what is functional medicine? Functional medicine should not be viewed as alternative medicine, but as a bridge to a more effective chronic care model. Functional medicine is a framework. It's a framework that bridges all forms of medicine into one common language. It's a science-based systems biology approach that utilizes emerging concepts in genomics, toxicology, biochemistry, and physiology, and helps us personalize our medicine and identify alterations in physiology that are contributing to the final pathology. Where's the root cause of illness? Why do these patients get sick? Is it genetic? Well, many experts now agree that between 5 and 20% of chronic disease is purely genetic flaw, and 80 to 95% of this is the gene-environment interaction. So how does our genome know what proteins to express at what time? Well, it's receiving messages. It's receiving messages from insulin, hormones, growth hormone, glucocorticoids, thyroid hormone, inflammatory cytokines. Now inflammation has now been seen to be the underlying cause of cancer, dementia, Alzheimer's, diabetes. These are messages that are being brought to our genome, and then our genome, our DNA, our book of life is basically responding. So this is where functional medicine sees the root cause of illness as the gene-environment interaction. So we see this web-like interaction of physiological factors, and we tend to take very big, extensive cases to find out, okay, where does this patient, what are their dysfunctions, what are their roads that have led up to the final pathology of. So we see here the messages from the outside world, stress, fatigue, exercise, and so on and so forth, basically interpreted through these fundamental physiological pathways. And then that information is brought to our genome, and then our genome elicits a response. So just to get an idea on how this web-like interaction works, I'll give you a few examples. So we talk about stress. One hormone or one neurotransmitter that can be released from stress is called glutamate. Glutamate is an excitatory neurotransmitter that can contribute to oxidative stress and inflammation. We now know that GI imbalances, commensal flora or symbiotic flora, if they're altered, can contribute to allergies. So we've had patients where they come in with allergies, we fix their digestive system and their allergies get better. We know that chemical exposure from diabetes 2007 can contribute to insulin resistance. These persistent organic pollutants have now been shown to cause insulin resistance. We know that lack of exercise, gait abnormalities, tooth infections, and can contribute to inflammation and altered cytokine activity. So we see this web-like interaction of factors. So this is the sort of functional medicine tree. Dr. Bland uses the analogy of a hummingbird. So that hummingbird is flapping their wings at 60 to 80 times a second. It's adjusting for wind, it's adjusting for temperature, for pressure, for gravity. And so our physiology is basically doing the same thing. Every message that's coming in is interpreted through the physiology, and it's basically adjusting. Over time, if the damage outweighs the support, it's only a matter of time until you get sick. So we have the most sophisticated biological systems in the world, but if the messages coming in interpreted through our genes or the antecedents lead to imbalances in these fundamental physiological processes, then you end up with overt pathology. So it sees overt pathology as an outcome. We don't wake up with diabetes. We don't wake up with fibromyalgia. These are the fundamental pathways that contribute to that pathology. So here, molecular pathways involved in hormone action have been the target of a multi-billion-dollar pharmaceutical research effort. Many of these pathways are under dietary control. So we can have huge impacts on these individuals just by changing the messages coming in from the food. Talking about the influence of food. So these two mice are same species, same DNA. This mouse was given the control diet, the mother mouse given the control diet. This mom was supplemented with zinc, methionine, choline, folate, and B12 methylating agents. And you can see completely different outcomes. High-risk cancer, low-risk diabetes, obesity, and prolonged life. So we know that the food is acting on a genetic level now, not just from a macronutrient standpoint. Here we see a completely separate response to basically carbohydrates. The rye pasta group, when they consumed rye pasta, they basically had 71 genes that were downregulated. The oat, wheat, potato group upregulated 62 genes involved in stress, cytokine-mediated immunity, and the interleukin pathway. So these patients actually mounted a stress response to food. So that's part of the reason why we believe that food plays a huge role. So treatment, is there a more effective way? And I think integrative strategies help us pave the way to a more comprehensive integrative approach to helping these patients get well.